So I've had my fair share of experience in rebuilding teams in NBA 2Ks, either my week, my NBA, my GM. And I got this idea from Bangle. I'll leave a link to his channel in the description. He did this over on Madden. But I'm going to be giving you guys my best teams to rebuild in 2K22, as well as a couple of the worst teams to rebuild. So what is going on, everybody? How is everybody doing today? Yes, so you guys have already been seeing a bunch of content from me. You saw my first 82-0 challenge earlier today. And now this is going to be my first kind of like tip or just advice idea video. I plan on doing a couple of these. So yeah, I'm going to be giving you guys 5 teams that I think are the best to rebuild in this game to take control of. And then 3 that aren't as much fun or easy to do. And now, you could say that there's really no worse team to rebuild in 2K because you could just go on Trade Finder, say you have one of the worst contracts in the league, Kevin Love, you could find a trade for him, right? But this is for a realistic kind of rebuild. If you're just going to go balls to the wall, sign anybody in free agency, trade up for a top 5 pick, unload all your bad contracts, take a bunch of young players in, that is fine. You can do that pretty much with any team in this league, even one of the worst teams that I show you. But this is going to be for kind of some of my realistic folks out there that really want to build a team with a simulation feel and be like, all right, that could happen in real life. I want to act as like a true GM, make moves, wheel and deal, come up with creative ideas to get things done. So the first team we're going to talk about is probably the most obvious best team to rebuild. It is the Oklahoma City Thunder because they already have their franchise guy in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He's under contract for the next 6 years. You don't got to worry about re-signing him, as he's under contract till his age 28 season. You can't get much further in 2K than having Shai under his contract. You also have Lou Dort, who's one of the best young perimeter defenders in the league, and you really need that when you're trying to construct a winning team. Just having that guy that could be the 2 or the 3 and can guard other teams' 1s, you can know how crucial that could be. If you watch my Thunder franchise in 2K21, you know how important he was to our team's success. He's only 22 years old, and he's on one of the league's best contracts due to his undrafted contract structure that he signed a couple years ago. Yeah, 1.78 mil this year, 1.93 mil next year. Yeah, you'll have to resign him in 2 years, but he's absolutely worth it due to him being young. He could shoot the 3 a little bit. You're going to have to train him a little bit there, but that perimeter D is just off the charts. Now, you have a veteran like Derek Favors, who's just really there for 1 year. You know, you can use him maybe as a mentor. Then you have some young bigs like Darius Bazley and Alexis Pokusevski. Pokusevski's 19, Darius Bazley's 21. You're bound for one of those to work out, and then it also gives you a reason to possibly move one. Maybe Poku is coming along a lot quicker, and then you're like, all right, we can move Darius Bazley, maybe package him in something, or just look to move him as he is under contract for the 2022 offseason. And then can't forget about the 6th overall pick, Josh Giddey, who you can develop to being that backcourt partner with Shai. He can play the 1 or the 2. Shai can play the 1 or the 2. I think Giddey might be more of a 1 and Shai the 2. But you can really develop him to somebody that can average double-digit assists down the line. And that's what's amazing with constructing a roster, and you have that point guard that doesn't need to score 20 a night. He might not even need to score 18. He could be a 14 point per game, 9 assists, 5 rebound, play good defense, shoot well from 3 guy, and you can let some of your other wings like Shai and then players you draft or maybe make a trade for in free agency, or the offseason, really get the scoring done. And you still have a couple other young players that are fun to use that you could package in a trade or just develop on your team, like Taylor Maladon. He was probably a top 10 rookie in real life in the 2020 season. He was a 2nd round pick, so he's on a great contract. And Terrence Mann, who was the 18th overall pick in the 2021 draft, he's on a great contract as well. You can develop him or Taylor Maladon to be a backup point guard. And whatever one kind of comes along quicker, you could trade the other one and they'll still have some good trade value due to them being just kind of a young, high potential player. And then Jamar Robinson are all good contract, 2nd round pick. Hey, he might be a rotational guy for you. But that is not what's the main part about the Thunder. Now, I will talk about free agency because the Thunder, not a big free agency destination, am I right? Now, they will have some cap space due to them having a young core, and really only Shai Gilgeous-Alexander being the big contract on the team. But it's just, I wouldn't say that they're a big free agent destination. They really haven't gotten a big free agency like that in a long time. Because over the last 15 years, their best players have either come via trade or the draft, like KD, Harden, Russell Westbrook, Paul George, Victor Oladipo, Carmelo Anthony, even Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So the main thing, though, is the amount of draft picks you have. Now, you might need to go on a real website or, like a real GM or Basketball Reference to figure out the accuracy on these picks, like when they're protected, when they convey. But boy, oh boy, you could potentially have 4 first-round picks in 2022. Now, that's if Cade leads the Pistons to the playoffs, which I've seen. I've seen them be in the play-in tournament. That Suns pick most likely going to be yours. You're definitely getting that Clippers pick in your pick. 4 first-round picks, at least 3 in 2022. And then in 2023, this is what I mean about like seeing the real conveying or not, because that Pistons pick you might not get till 2027. But in 2K, you'll get that in 2023. You could get the Wizards, the Heat pick, and you're going to get the swap best with the Clippers. Now, in 2K21, this was such a good pick to own because they'd end up losing Kawhi and not being good in 2022. But that's still a very good pick to have. And then also, the lottery protected pick from the Nuggets that they ended up getting, I believe, from the 2020 draft when they traded up to get RJ Hampton. Yeah, you could have 4 potential first round picks here, as well as 5 if this Pistons pick doesn't go through in 2022. That is absurd. Now, you wouldn't want to draft every single player because you just wouldn't find playing time with all those guys that I just mentioned, all those young players that are under contract, and then all these draft picks. But that's what OKC is about. You can make a big trade because I mentioned, not a big free agency destination, but boom, you could go out, make a big trade, and then you have 4 first-round picks in 2024. And that's if these ones, like if the Wizards and Heat don't make the playoffs, then you'll get these in 2024. It's absurd. 2025, you have minimum 2. 2026, you have 3 first-round picks. It's actually mind-blowing. The Thunder are 100% the best team and probably the most fun team to rebuild in 2K22. All right, so the first worst team to rebuild is going to be the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, don't get me wrong, the Memphis Grizzlies are a good team. They have one of the best young players in the NBA in Ja Morant, and they'd still be a very fun team to rebuild. So like the OKC Thunder, the Grizzlies, not a big free agency destination. They really haven't signed anybody huge over the last 15 years either. It's kind of been people via trade or the draft. Like, they ended up getting Zach Randolph, okay, but then they pretty much traded for Marc Gasol, drafted Mike Conley, drafted Ja Morant, drafted Jaren Jackson Jr. You know what I mean, right? They're not going to be a big player in free agency, but it's not like they're going to have a lot of cap space in free agency as well, because they made some interesting moves this offseason. Now you have Ja Morant, you're building around him, obviously. He's got 1 more year until you're maxing him out on his next contract, and he may carry you. He develops very well in this game. Jaren Jackson Jr. is an interesting player because he is going to require a big contract extension at the end of this offseason. And can Jaren Jackson Jr. be your number 2? I'm not really sure, because then after a year, you're locked in to about 60 mil, about half your payroll, and probably a little bit more on just these 2 players. And then you really have a lot of solid players like that you want in your NBA rotation, but aren't going to develop into making that a big 3. So that means you're going to either have to look at this via trade or draft. Now, you do have that Utah Jazz pick from the Mike Conley trade. That could be something, but it's not like Kyle Anderson, Steven Adams. Like, even though Dylan Brooks and Brandon Clark and Desmond Bane are young, they're never becoming stars where you could have a big 3 and contend in the competitive Western Conference. Tillman and Bane, like, recently drafted good young players, same with Brandon Clark. They're up there already in age. Like, they're going to peak soon. At least Clark's going to peak soon with his overall. And then you have Tyus Jones, good player. Anthony Melton, good player. They're never becoming stars. I feel like your best shot is Zaire Williams and going really so hard on developing him to being that big 3 guy. Unless now you're going to have to look via trade. Now, you may be able to accumulate enough assets to go after like a Bradley Beal or a Karl Anthony Towns, but it's going to be hard to do. And for their future draft picks, it's actually pretty good because they have this Lakers pick from the 2022 draft. Oh, okay, yeah, this was in the Pelican trade. I was like, where did they get this pick? Yes, from like the 80 Pelican trade, and then this was in the Bledsoe trade. They have their pick. They have that Jazz top 5 protected. So they have enough draft capital in 2022 to make a big trade. That is your saving grace, I think, with this, is using that and then maybe packaging like Zaire, Brandon Clark, or something like that, going all in on like a Cat or Bradley Beal and building that big 3. I think that's your best bet. You do have the Warriors top 3 protected pick here from the Andre Iguodala trade. So you do have some other picks that aren't yours that could pan out to something. It's just like you really need to hit on your draft picks or make a nice move right away because you're going to be locked into that Triple J salary or that Ja Morant salary. Now you could go the route of trading Triple J, but it could get risky. Next best team is the Atlanta Hawks, a team that just went to the Eastern Conference Finals and is still one of the more younger teams in the NBA. And I actually love this team because you have your franchise player in Trae Young. He's under contract like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You don't need to worry about that until he's 28. You are chilling. Next up, you have Clint Capella. And what I mentioned about Josh Giddey is he's one of those positional guys, mainly for point guards and centers. He doesn't need the ball in his hands. He could be so effective scoring 13 points a night, but he's going to get you hella rebounds. He's going to get you blocks. He's going to be a great rim protector, shoot at a high field goal percentage, and be a great pick and roll partner with Trae Young. And he's under a nice contract as he just re-signed because he will be under contract for the next 4 years till his age 30 season. John Collins, a good player who they just paid till he's 27. And you don't need to keep him long term. I actually do like the fit of him next to Clint Capella, but he will have trade value. You can look to move him. And Atlanta is definitely more of a free agency destination than Oklahoma City and Memphis. So you could look at free agents, but you really don't have cap space with the way this roster is constructed at the current moment. So really to upgrade this team, you got to go via trade, but you have so many good trade assets to package together. You have Bogdan Bogdanovic, who's not on a great contract. I mean, he's making 18 mil for the next 2 years, and as a player option, probably will opt in. You could look to move it though. 18 mil isn't crazy. It's tradable. He's still a good player. DeAndre Hunter was so good in the playoffs before he got hurt, and he's young still. He's only 23 years old. Now, it's a little bit on the older side compared to where he is, like when we go over Cam Reddish's age, but you can develop him. If not, if you want to move him, pick up his team option, look to trade him in the offseason. It's not like you have to pay him right now, which was one of the downsides of Jaren Jackson Jr. Gallinari, I've seen retire after year one, so it's kind of hit or miss for him, but he only has 2 years on this contract. You will have to pay him 21 mil next year. Not the end of the world. Kevin Huerter, a young player. He's somebody you maybe want to move at the deadline, or you're going to pay him on a nice maybe 3 for 30 type of contract in free agency, 3 for 36, or you can look at a sign and trade, or you can just let him walk. But hey, it's not like it's the end of the world if you lose Kevin Huerter for nothing, because you got also Cam Reddish. Like DeAndre Hunter, if you don't think he's in your long-term plans, pick him up his team option in the offseason, and then look to move him. But it's just you have so many options, like Onyeka Okongwu, the 6th overall pick. He could eventually develop to succeed Clint Capella down the line. If you want to maybe roll out Clint Capella for the next 2 years, while Okongwu's still on his rookie deal, trade Capella as he's getting older, and let Okongwu shine as the starting center. Could do that. And then Jalen Johnson, who I think might have star potential, and he was selected 20th overall. You can develop him as well if you're going to move on from Reddish and or Huerter or Hunter. And then for their draft pick scenario, it's kind of odd. So they don't have that Thunder pick anymore. Nice to get updated that. They just have their picks pretty much throughout the time being. But they're a team that I think can really, like, they already have their star player in Trae Young. I think they have their nice center that could maybe be part of a big three. I mean, he was in Houston with Chris Paul and James Harden. But you're really maybe looking to package like a John Collins, a Cam Reddish, and maybe a first-round pick and, like, I don't know, maybe somebody else in there to go after that number 2 next to Trae Young on the offensive end. Either it's Bradley Beal. I don't think Ben Simmons would be a good target, but you can look at that. You can look at Pascal Siakam. You can look at Domantas Sabonis. Probably not some options. I'm just throwing them off the top of my head. But you can look at some guys, and you definitely have enough trade assets to get that done. All right, the second worst team to rebuild is going to be the Utah Jazz. Now, they're a team that's already good, so they don't need much rebuilding, but I don't know how much longer they're going to be good for, because they have their franchise guy, Donovan Mitchell. Like the Thunder, like the Grizzlies, like the Hawks, you are chilling with your franchise guy. But it's just what's happening around him and the ages of players around him. Because Rudy Gobert, good player, don't get me wrong, massive contract. He's going to be making $46 million in his age 33 season. He's 29, so he's pretty much in his prime at his peak. And he's not going to be a number 2 scorer for you to win a championship. Now, yes, if you're just going in Trade Finder, you can move his contract easily, but if you're kind of playing this realistic, I don't know who's taking on that contract. Mike Conley, good player, under contract for the next 2 years, but he might have a player or team option on that third year. On that third year, so it's basically a 2-year deal. But he's 34. He's not getting better. Joe Ingles, 34. Not getting much better. Jordan Clarkson, great player, just won 6 man, but he's already 29. And he's not going to be a top 3 player on your team to win a championship. Rudy Gay, 35. Whiteside, 32. Bojan Bogdanovic, 32. And he's under contract for the next 2 years on a not friendly contract because you're not going to have much cap space. And even if you did have cap space, it's Utah. Not also a big free agency destination. Royce O'Neal, 28. I mean, you do have Pascal, you don't get Azubuike, and then Jared Butler, who you just drafted, but it's not really the best young core in the league. It's a little scary because you don't really have a lot of trade assets. You have a lot of old players. It could get scary in like 2 years. So you really have to figure out what your long-term plan is in year 1. And your draft capital, not great. You don't have your 2022 first-round pick unless it's in the top 5. Goes to Memphis. Now, you could be all right with that. It looks like they also don't have their 2024 first-round pick. I guess that is a protection backup. I'm not entirely sure what that is from. I don't also think that was in the Mike Conley trade, but I could be wrong. But yeah, like the draft capital, looking bleak, not a big free agency destination, and don't even already have your big 3 solidified in a tough Western Conference. So it's scary. You could win it in year 1. You can get lucky, or you could just play well in year 1 and win your title, and it's all right. But if you don't, could be looking at a scary rebuild. All right, the next best team to rebuild is going to be the New Orleans Pelicans. So there's a common trend here. Having your star franchise player kind of solidified. And it helps with the Pelicans. Now, the Grizzlies were in a similar boat, but they were on the worst teams. But the Pelicans, one of the best teams, is because Zion, you don't have to pay him yet. You will have to pay him in 2 years, but you can actually go after a big free agent in New Orleans, which is not a small market. It's probably closer to smaller than big market, but it's at least a bigger market, I would say, than OKC and Memphis and Utah. Because also playing with Zion Williamson is pretty nice. So, yeah, they have their franchise guy in Zion Williamson, also develops very well in 2K. You have Brandon Ingram, who's a good number 2 to Zion. You probably want him to be your number 3 on a championship team, but he's also a movable asset. 24 years old, was an all-star a year ago. You could definitely move him. And his contract isn't that bad where you could definitely trade him 100%. Jonas Valanciunas, I actually like this trade a lot for him, but he's an expiring contract. You'll see if you want to pay him or not. If anything, you'll be off that contract at the end of the year. That's a good thing because then you got off the Steven Adams contract a year earlier. Devontae Graham, he's a movable asset because the contract isn't too big, but he might develop into a nice sixth man or starting 1 or 2 for you. Josh Hart, not a bad contract at all. He has 2 team options. Just a great deal. If he plays bad for you in 1, just decline his team option. Jackson Hayes, a movable asset. Like Cam Reddish, DeAndre Hunter, and other players I mentioned. If you don't really want him on your team, like Darius Baisley, pick up his team option at the end of the year, look to move him. Same thing goes with Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Kyron Lewis, still only 20 years old. You can develop him to being your franchise point guard. Trey Murphy, just drafted. He's going to be such a nice piece to have around Zion due to his shooting. So you definitely have enough pieces here to make a trade. I think you could package a trade around Brandon Ingram for Damian Lillard, who's tradable this year. You could trade for Damian Lillard. You can even trade for guys like Anthony Davis. I've done it already. So you have enough young assets as well as a good amount of draft capital from the Anthony Davis and Drew Holiday deals. You have your first round pick this year, 2023. You have your swap best with the Lakers. 2024, though, look at this. You're going to have 3 first round picks, which is very nice. 2025, 2 first round picks. 2026, looks like, okay, yeah, it's a swap best. So you have a little bit more draft capital than normal, and it's definitely a top 5 team with draft capital in the league. So you have that to maybe land your guy using a trade, because you kind of want to figure out your team a little bit before Zion gets or becomes a free agent. So that's the main caveat. Try to figure out, you don't want to do what the Mavericks did. I didn't end up putting the Mavericks in here because they have Luka Doncic. You'll end up being fine. It's not that scary. But you want to maybe build your big 3 or get your star number 2 around your franchise guy, for this case Zion, and what the Mavericks didn't do in Luka, before you pay them on their rookie max extension. Because then you really can't go out and sign somebody. Yes, you can via trade, but the Mavericks are going to be locked in at least for the next couple of years, unless something crazy happens, as the NBA possibly can, that Kristaps is always going to be the number 2 there, which I don't know if they'll be able to win a championship with that. But for the Pelicans, you still have a chance to build your big 3 and just kind of construct your roster around Zion Williamson and get that star number 2. Either it's a Damian Lillard trade, either it's a Bradley Beal signing. I'm not sure. All right, so the last worst team to rebuild is going to be the San Antonio Spurs. Now, they're still a fun team to rebuild. I feel like all these teams are still fun because the Jazz, it gives you a challenge. And for this team, they still have some fun players to use, and you can look at maybe making like a Ben Simmons deal because they've been rumored or not. But it's really, the roster's not great. They don't really have that young star. Pretty much every other team we've mentioned, and Donovan Mitchell, Trae Young, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Zion, and Ja, the Spurs don't have that. Murray, good player, 25 years old. We kind of know what he's going to be. He could maybe be an all-star, not a franchise leader. Keldon Johnson is probably your best chance, but it's still not likely that I think in 2K he develops to being a franchise star. You have Thad Young, who you can move, get an asset. Derek White, same thing. Jakob Poeltl as well. Doug McDermott down the line. You still have these veterans that would be valuable, that aren't on terrible contracts, that good teams would want, maybe give up their late first-round pick. Now, there is a good chance that Devin Vassell, Lonnie Walker, or Joshua Primo ends up being a very good player for you. But those are the 3 that I would bank on, okay, 100%. I would say probably Vassell has the best shot on being a really good 3-and-D player. And you also don't have any special draft capital. You just pretty much have your first-round picks. Now, you do have this top 10 protected first-round pick from the Bulls in 2025. So I'm guessing that is from the DeMar DeRozan deal. But that's really it. So it's scary. You don't have a lot of draft capital. You don't have a lot of good young assets. You could make a trade. But I guess San Antonio does have the franchise history that you could sign a big name free agent. I mean, they did it with LaMarcus Aldridge. Yes, they had Kawhi Leonard under their team. But you could probably land a big free agent in San Antonio. It's just you better hope that one of Johnson, Vassell, Primo, or Lonnie Walker / DeJounte Murray develops into that number 2 that a number 1 would want to come and help win in San Antonio. All right, so lastly, we have 2 of the best teams. I had 5 best and 3 worst. It's the Houston Rockets. I actually hated this rebuild. This would have came in one of my worst to start 2K21. Now it's coming in at one of my best. So John Wall contract, it sucks. It only has 2 more years. Probably unmovable. You got to eat it like I mentioned with the Danilo Gallinari contract, but it's not that bad. Christian Wood. There's 2 crazy ways you can go with him, or just fun ways. You can help him, or you can sign him to a new extension, let him develop the young guys and be there and just kind of the vet on the team. Or you can look to move him in the offseason because he's still under contract, $14 million, easy to move. A team would want it. And depending how well he plays this year, you can either get maybe a first-round pick for him, or you can get a young asset. And then, oh boy, you have your franchise guy in Jalen Green. And you can see how he could develop. That's kind of the fun part. Because could he blossom into a superstar? Hell yeah. Could he maybe just disappoint you? Also yes. So you don't know, which you really need to land his development, which is a fun thing to have. Eric Gordon could definitely move him in the offseason. Everybody wants shooting. And then you have like a bunch of young guys. Like Kevin Porter Jr. could develop into a really good player. Jayshawn Tate, still only 25. It's not young, but he could still be a very good rotational guy. Kenyon Martin Jr. was a good rookie, only 20 years old. Alperen Sengun has kind of star potential, only 19. And then one of Garuba and Christopher is bound to ball out. So I like this team a lot. And the draft capital for them is a little bit weird because they got some first-round picks in the James Harden deal from the Nets, but they still lost some from the Russell Westbrook Chris Paul trade, which kind of hurt them down the line. But yeah, they have 2 first-round picks in 2022. They have 2 in 2023. 2024 is the one year that you hope you're kind of good because you don't have your own first-round pick. 2025, swap best. 2026, also another year you hope you're good because you don't have your first-round pick. And the Rockets are probably the biggest free agency destination team. I'm probably going to mention in this video them or Atlanta. So you can go out and get a star that would want to maybe come next to Jalen Green and Christian Wood. I actually love this Rockets rebuild. I'm very excited to do it eventually. And the final team is the Detroit Pistons that come into a very similar mold as the Houston Rockets, and I think are maybe set off a little bit better because Jeremy Grant, very similar to Christian Wood. I would say they both had similar seasons. Last year, he's making a little bit more money, but you can either maybe re-sign him, let him be the veteran on your young team, or you can look to trade him in the offseason. You have Cade Cunningham, like Jalen Green, could be your franchise guy, the next MVP in the NBA. And then you also have your supporting young studs on the squad. Sadiq Bey was a very underrated rookie last year. He develops well in 2K. Isaiah Stewart and Killian Hayes, all 3 guys from the 2019 class, you have going forward that could be very good players for you. I guess Killian Hayes coming in at 71 overall could be a hit or miss. And even Saban Lee, only 22 years old, he was a good rookie. Now, Detroit, not a big free agency destination, so maybe Houston's a little bit better off going there. And your draft capital is a little weird, actually. Okay. So you have your 2022 first-round pick. That's lottery protected, so you're getting that anyway. And then you're going to probably have to trade override for your 2023 back. This is what I mean. Like, you have to look up on Real GM or Basketball Reference the accuracy of these picks. Because then you pretty much have your first-round pick every year. I guess you don't have much of your second-round picks, but then you could definitely get a first-round pick out there for Jeremy Grant, or if it comes to it, for Killian Hayes. So it's really developing Cade Cunningham, I would say Sadiq Bey, getting your Chet Holmgren, getting your Paolo Banchero, I really haven't mentioned these guys yet, and really going forward with kind of that young core there, and even being bad in 2023, which is fine, because imagine you can land, let's say hypothetically, a Paolo Banchero, right? You move Jeremy Grant, you have Cade Cunningham, Sadiq Bey, Paolo Banchero, and Isaiah Stewart. You could find a center in free agency, 100%, that would probably want to sign with you. Either it's a Mitchell Robinson, Yusuf Nurkic, somebody nothing crazy, Miles Turner eventually, and then maybe getting Amari Bailey in the 2023 class, and then you could eventually have Cade, Amari Bailey, Sadiq Bey, Paolo Banchero, and say hypothetically a Miles Turner. That team could eventually win a championship in 3 to 4 years. So yeah, that is going to be for me. I hope you guys did enjoy the video. Drop a like if you did. I hope I kind of gave you some good advice there. Let me know if you disagree with anything I said down below. Also, you might see Evan Mobley and the Cavs on the screen. So when I made the thumbnail originally, I thought I was going to have the Cavs in one of the worst, but I ended up seeing, okay, there's maybe 3 other teams that I prefer, because at least you have Evan Mobley, who I think will be a star. I think one of Garland and Sexton wound up being really good. It was just pretty much that you're locked in on Markkanen and Allen. Love contract untradeable. Will you be able to develop a Coro? And then are you going to re-sign Sexton to a massive deal? But I ended up not putting them in, but you can put them maybe in the worst if you want. But yeah, drop a like if you did. Let me know down below if I left out maybe a worst team, a best team. If you want to change anything that I mentioned, a team going from best to worst to worst to best, please let me know down below. I love you guys, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.